Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned because it's Wednesday, which means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, we'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we're talking about Marvel Comics' first limited series. It was an epic event. It was grand. It was amazing. It was incredible. It was epic. It was none of those things. It was Contest of Champions. It was Marvel Superhero Contest of Champions, which was Marvel's first limited series. It was a 3-issue limited series, which became a thing in the 80s where we would have limited series featuring characters that didn't have their own books, and it allowed stories to be told that would not be told otherwise. And so that was a good thing. This comic book, though, well, it certainly has its points of interest. So Marvel Comics decided to do one of those big treasury editions in honor of the Olympics. And so they came up with a story that would, feature appearances by all of these major superheroes in honor of the Olympics. And they started working on it, and they got John Romita Jr. to do the artwork, or to do the pencils, and Pablo Marcos did the inking. And who did the story? The writers were Bill Mantlo, Mark Grunwald, and Stephen Grant. And there ended up being some help on the pencils by Bob Layton. Pablo Marcos did most of the inking, but Bob Layton did some of the inking because there were some things that needed to be done to this story before it was finally published. So yeah, the year was 1979 when this started to be created in honor of the Olympics. And it was going to be kind of a Marvel Comics Olympic game, where we get different characters from around the world, and they would all compete in a contest of champions in honor of the Olympics. Like I said, unfortunately, the Olympics that they were honoring ended up being the 1980 Olympics. And for those of you who don't remember that far back, the 1980 Olympics were boycotted by the United States and a bunch of other countries because of the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. So the Olympics in 1980 turned out to be kind of a dud as far as an Olympics is concerned, because it was boycotted, and a lot of countries didn't go, including the United States. So it's like not the greatest Olympics to write a comic book honoring. So they had this treasury edition that they were going to do for the Olympics, and the Olympics just, it was what it was. So they decided, let's not do this. Let's not do this comic. So they canceled it. They said, we won't do this. John Romita Jr. did do a lot of pencils already, but what can you do? Project's over. We'll move on and forget this idea. But nobody told Pablo Marcos, who is still working on the penciled pages, and he kept working on it, and eventually he asked, hey, when are you going to send me more pages for this story that I've been working on? I'm not hearing anything, guys, because they forgot to tell Pablo. This is the story. This is how the story goes. I don't know if this is a true story. So they decide, well, we've got these pages, they're pretty good, So maybe we should do something with this. Maybe we can cobble together a story. We just won't mention the Olympics. The Olympics will have nothing to do with it. It'll just be a contest of champions that has nothing to do with the Olympics at all. And we're not going to make a treasury edition of it, so we'll do a limited series. We'll come out with 3 issues of this story, which is what they did. And Well, let's take a look at it. So, well, let me just say right off the bat, this story is not great as a story. The artwork is decent. It's decent, and it has actually a couple impressive moments. But the story itself was pretty lame. They just watched an old Star Trek episode, said, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's make a story sort of after that." And so they came up with a very lame, Simple Simon kind of story. So the story sucks, but the artwork was decent, and I think the quality of the artwork is what made them decide to go ahead with this project anyway, since they already had it. You know, they had to pay Pablo, and they had to pay John Romita Jr. They might as well finish it somehow and make some money. So that's what they did. And actually, despite the crappy story, and it is pretty crappy, this turned out to be a success. And why wouldn't it? If you see a cover like that featuring all the superheroes, you're going to buy it, because at this time when this came out, it finally came out, I believe in 81 or 82. At this time, you didn't have a lot of stuff like this. There were no huge events that crossed over all the characters. This was like the ultimate team up right here. Of course you're going to buy it. So we end up with Contest of Champions. This is the first issue right there with that awesome cover. And we have that opening splash page with everybody's heads floating around. And this is the 2-page spread, which opens the story. And so, of course, this was still part of the story that was originally intended for that Marvel Treasury edition. And you can actually see some of the pages, the dimensions of the artwork are different sizes, so you kind of know when the Treasury edition pages leave off. But this is from Avengers Mansion, when everybody is working out and exercising, and it's a great page. That's a great page. That's a great opening for the story. And then they all vanish, and then we have different scenes of different superheroes from around the world vanishing. We have a lot of international superheroes in this, because originally it was intended to be an Olympic story. And so, the Fantastic Four are here, and they vanish, other characters vanish. And yeah, there's a lot of vanishments happening, including Machine Man. Machine Man's in here. And so we have pages and pages of characters vanishing from whatever they were doing. And this is the best page in the whole book right here. This is where all of the superheroes suddenly appear in this huge outer space stadium. So there's a sports stadium that is floating out in space. And all of these superheroes just arrive there and are just kind of standing around. And I mean, including the Hulk. The Hulk's just like looking around. He's not smashing anything as you think he would in this kind of situation. They're all just kind of like, what the hell is going on? And our flying characters, some of those characters are flying around, and it all looks pretty amazing. This is a great page. You got to wonder, they're all just are there restrooms in here? Are there concession stands? I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any stands where people are actually watching the event. It's basically just a prison. So all of these guys have just been kidnapped. Who has kidnapped these people? Well, they don't know. For the first few minutes, they're all confused. And they're all talking to each other. And when they talk to each other, they're sure to use each other's superhero names so that you, reader, will know who the heck they're talking about. They have obscure characters here like Dr. Druid. Dr. Druid, who we don't hear much about anymore. Dr. Druid, I sense that this is not the work of the devil. He senses it. The forces at work here seem beyond the mystical Hellstrom. So we got Hellstrom, the son of Satan, and Dr. Druid. They are They were kidnapped along with everybody else. And they're all greeting each other and using each other's superhero names, like I said. Hey, superhero. Because just like you do in real life, where you just, when you talk, you just automatically use somebody's name. So there's a lot of that going on before you finally have these guys show up. So these are the people who kidnapped, these are the beings who kidnapped every single superhero off the planet. And so this is the Grand Master. He's the Grand Master, and this other character floating around in the background is the Unknown. And so the Grand Master and the Unknown decide to have a contest, and they are going to use the pawns for their contest are going to be superheroes. They're going to get all the superheroes together, and they're going to choose a team from the superheroes to play out their contest. And so we have the Grand Master here explaining all this. And he's saying, by drawing upon all the power of the elders of the universe, we have placed every living being on your planet in a state of suspended animation. If you refuse to play our game, we shall not release your planet. If you do play, Earth will be freed at game's end. The rules of the game are these. 4 objects, quarters of the gleaming globe of life, will be hidden at the 4 corners of the Earth. The Earth has corners, in case you didn't know. My faceless opponent and I will each choose 12 champions to seek out the objects. Whichever of us amasses the most pieces wins. And if I win, I will be granted the power to restore to life my brother, the Collector. So his brother is the Collector, who was murdered. And the Unknown, the mysterious Unknown, can grant the Grandmaster's wish and restore his brother to life. So, and if the Grandmaster loses, then he dies. So, because everybody on Earth is in a state of suspended animation, however they were, they have to play this game. But there are dumb rules to this game. There are some extra dumb rules. So this is the Unknown is now speaking, the Unknown in her big cloak. Hence we chose the sphere for our contest and assembled all those possessing superhuman powers, so that neither will have any undue advantage over the other. We have disqualified all but Earth's main race of Homo sapiens, excluding from the game those immortals, Inhumans, Atlanteans, Eternals, and aliens who also occupy this world. What? So they're excluding all of those guys from the game. So that excludes Submariner, it excludes Thor, excludes all the Eternals. So why did you kidnap all those guys? Why aren't they all still on Earth in a state of frozen, suspended animation? You just kidnapped all these superheroes that you knew you were not going to use, which is, it's lame. That's lame. Mutants apparently are okay because they do choose mutants. I don't know. It's just a way not to have Thor in the contest because Thor is just way too powerful, maybe. But wait till you see the people they did choose out of all the characters they could. So they start choosing right away. Captain America is taken away. The Talisman, who you don't know probably anymore, is taken away. Iron Man, so at least they've got a good choice in Iron Man. I would choose Iron Man. So eventually we have these 2 teams. Okay, very clearly drawn here, so you know exactly who's in the 2 teams. Okay, this is the Grandmaster's team over here, and this is the Unknown's team. And many of the characters in these teams are unknown. So these are not the teams anybody who reads comic books would choose. It has some cool characters we might choose. You've got the Thing here. You've got Captain America's cool. Wolverine, yeah, you definitely choose Wolverine probably because you want Wolverine in your comic book. But you also have, really, if you're going to win the contest, you want Daredevil. You could have chosen Spider-Man. Nobody chose Spider-Man. Why? Why on earth if you're having a comic book like this, would you not choose Spider-Man? I don't know. But they chose Daredevil instead. I mean, I like Daredevil, but, you know, he's up against characters like Iron Man. But, you know, who knows? On the other team, you've got characters we recognize, like Black Panther. You've got the Invisible Woman. She's got that force field. It's understandable that you'd pick her. She's the most powerful member of the Fantastic Four. And she's up against the Thing and the other team. You've got Storm. Okay, that's cool. Iron Fist? Really? Okay, we got Iron Fist. And you've also got a bunch of characters you don't know, because remember, the only reason the characters they chose are in this is because it was the Olympics and you needed international, it was an international contest. So we need these characters. These characters were all chosen back when they were still doing the Olympics Treasury Edition. So we have to have all of these weird characters that you've never heard of, and they're in the book, and they're mostly, you know, there's some offensive stereotyping going on. This was originally conceived in 1979, and I guess things hadn't gotten any different by 1981 or 2, whenever this was put out. But it's interesting the way some of the characters interact in this story. So these are their dumb teams, you know. So we've got the Unknowns team, we've got the Grandmasters team, and they all have to find these 4 pieces of the glowing beach ball, which are going to be hidden in different parts of the world, and they have to do it quick. I think they've got like an hour to find each team has like an hour to find their corner of the glowing beach ball. This is the plot of the story. So the way all of these characters are separated into different teams is very reminiscent of Gardner Fox's Silver Age Justice League stories, where you'd have the Justice League that would split up into teams to, you know, find whatever they had to find, which is what they're doing in this story, or do whatever they have to do. Only Gardner Fox would have infused this story with some imagination. You wouldn't just have like hunks of a glowing beach ball. So we move on to issue number 2. And this is where all the action is going to happen. We get a recap of what happened before. We've got the stadium floating around out in space, and the first contest. Again, this is pretty well drawn. Takes place out in the North Pole, where everybody should freeze instantly when you consider what they're wearing, but they don't. And so we have pretty much characters fighting each other. The fights are actually pretty lackluster. So all of the actual battles are just kind of there. Here we have Daredevil and Iron Fist facing off. And they have a fight, which is, you know, it's kind of cool. That's a cool fight. But, you know, otherwise, nothing to write home about. But it was, you know, this was popular. This was a popular story. So this is the first part, and somehow Daredevil is the guy that actually manages to get his hunk of the glowing beach ball. And we go here to an old West ghost town, which might be a movie set. We never really learn. And all the characters have to introduce each other because nobody knows who these people are. Like, I'm Iron Man. Okay, so, and then we have Sabra from Israel. That's Sabra from Israel. And she's teamed up with the Arabian Knight. And the Arabian Knight, who's really upset, says, bah, whatever her powers, the Arabian Knight will not fight alongside a Jewess. You know, because he's the Arabian Knight. And so they hate each other, and he's going to fly off on his magic carpet. And so these are the characters we have, but we also have Captain Britain. We have some lame character whose name I can't remember. Oh, he's the Defensor. We have the Defensor there. He's from France. Anyway, so we have the battles, and we have She-Hulk tackling the Arabian Knight where she says, "You just said the wrong thing, Turban Top." She calls him Turban Top. It's not the worst thing she could have said, I guess. But yeah, you get a lot of that kind of thing in this comic book. So this is interesting. And so they have their battle. So this is basically, all of this entire comic book is just an excuse to have fight scenes, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's also not exactly a compelling story where it's just one fight after the other. And a lot of the fights, frankly, aren't that interesting. And a lot of the characters you don't really care about. But we move on to the third issue. We still have a couple contests left in the third issue. And we have the big Death's Head floating around there, spoiling who the Unknown is. Again, we get a recap in the third issue. And then we get the team with the Thing and Wolverine, and they're going to be going up against the Black Panther. And you have that guy wasn't from France. It's this guy who's from France. It's not Defensor. Defensor was actually from somewhere else. I can't remember. But this is the guy that's from France. This dopey guy with the wings. I am called Le Peregrine. It's Le Peregrine, the winged champion of France. Anyway, so we have battles, and we have this scene where Wolverine tries to kill the Black Panther. He calls the Black Panther Blackie. Could be worse. And, they have a battle which is very, it's not the battle you would have expected when you see Wolverine go up against the Black Panther. They not much happens here. But you do have that. And then you have, Angel fighting the French Angel, Le Peregrine. And that actually turns out to be a pretty interesting fight. Considering. We have a lot of that going on. Eventually, the Thing, of course, gets his corner of the big glowing ball. We have one more fight in the jungle. We've got Sasquatch. We've got Captain America. And you also have the worst character in this whole story, which I think is Shamrock. Is that her name? It's the Irish character. And the Irish character, Shamrock, eventually gets her corner of the glowing beach ball. So everybody's got their corner of the glowing beach ball. And as Shamrock touches the glowing beach ball, we see in the corner here, as Shamrock touches the Golden Globe quarter, 6 superheroes vanish. Final score, Grandmaster 3, Unknown 1. So the Grandmaster wins. And then this is the part where everybody reading this comic is scratching their head because Shamrock was not on Grandmaster's team. Clearly, in the first issue, you see that Shamrock was actually in the Unknown's team and that this should have been a tie. So they screwed up. Marvel Comics screwed up. And nobody mentions the screw up in this issue because nobody realized it. And so the Grandmaster wins. His brothers return to life. It still costs him his life because, Death is revealed to be the Unknown. The Unknown is actually Death. And yeah, if you're reading this comic book and if you actually paid attention, which the creators of this comic book did not do, you would realize that it should be a tie. This should be a tie. But it's not. So how could this have happened? Well, there is a section in this where Tom DeFalco, who was the editor of this, writes an introduction about the creation of this story. And he hated it. He hated working on it. It's perfectly clear that he hated working on this story. He didn't give a crap about it. This is a story that did not matter to him. He would rather have been doing anything else, clearly, than working on this story. So when this mistake happened in the script, because I guess the people who wrote the story didn't care either, he didn't catch it because he just didn't give a crap. And then Jim Shooter was kind of pissed. But he's like, what do you want me to do? It's already done, Nobody will notice. Everybody who read this story noticed. So they actually ended up doing a sequel to the story, which started in, I think it was an annual for West Coast Avengers, something like that. And they did a sequel to Contest of Champions, which I'll not talk about here. I've already talked long enough about this dumb comic book. But yeah, they had to, and that ended up being, I think, a plot point of that story. That, hey, this should have been a tie. What the hell? It was all a trick. I think it was all a trick from Death, caused everybody not to notice. So blame Death for the screw up at the end of this comic. Anyway, that was Contest of Champions. I read it so you don't have to. But the artwork, like I said, it's not bad at all. Really. Some hard parts of it aren't the best, but there's some good stuff in here. There's some good stuff in here artwork wise. The story, crap. Okay, guys, I will catch you next week when Jimmy Olsen turns into a werewolf. You got to be here for that. Bye, guys.